We'll use this time now to acknowledge that this production takes place on the unceded territories of the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam people.
Our intention for this podcast is to provide a space where survivors can share with us their lived experiences and what it was like for them to navigate health and wellness after residential school.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Woven Spirit, Threads of Wisdom. My name is Teka Desjarlais. I'm Soto and Mohawk, and I was born and raised on these territories. I will be your host for today's episode. Today we're joined by the wonderful Shirley David. Thank you so much for joining us, Shirley. Can you introduce yourself for us?
My name is Shirley David. I'm originally from Kitsan-Wet'suwet'en territory, but I was raised and work on our Shwapam territory in Kamloops.
I'm really curious about, exactly the kinds of things that it took to support you along your healing journey. It's my understanding that you went to residential school, and I wanted to ask you about the impact that had.
Yes, I attended residential school from age 5. I was apprehended, and I was part of the 60 Scoop foster care and the residential school system. It was part in the 50s and 60s. And it was a social worker that took us from our territory, and that's the Kitsan-Wet'suwet'en territory. And they told us we're going to a better place. So being the youngest of the girls, I just followed without question. And we ended up in this big building in the interior, the Williams Lake, and that's where I went, was the St. Joseph's Mission in Williams Lake. They brought us there, but they just dropped us off. They didn't explain anything, and that's where the nuns and the priest took over. And they put us in this big room. I was only about 5 then, 4 or 5. And the scary part of that, I didn't know I had sisters. There was 5 of us that were taken from up north, and 2 were put in foster care, and the rest were put in residential school in Williams Lake. And with that, them days you weren't allowed, the welfare wouldn't tell you where the kids are. The community didn't know where we were there, and they didn't tell us where we were from. So I didn't even know that I had family or that I was part of a nation up north. And I grew up in residential school, between residential school and the foster care system. So if I wasn't in residential school, I went into the foster care in the holidays.
And so how old were you when you were at residential school and then you transitioned to going to foster care?
When we started, I was just turning 5. And by then, they didn't let us go because we were under the welfare. The ward, we call it, the ward of the welfare. So I aged out probably about 17, 18. So I spent my whole life in residential school.
And when you mentioned when you were apprehended that the people who took you said that they were bringing you to somewhere better. Did you believe them?
Well, 5 years old, when like for me, I liked comics, I liked reading. So they used that. They said there are going to be a lot of comics there, and they even had comics in the car to bring us into the car. So, you just followed your sisters, you just followed your family, and we didn't know what was going on.
When, for you, did the curtain drop? When did you realize
I think when we ended up in that big building and everybody left us. Because when we got into the building, it was a big 4-story building, and I was the youngest of the 3. So they separated us, and part of that is a separation is they took me away from my sisters, and I never met them and I never knew them until I came of age at 17. I see them, but I'd never interacted with them. And in residential school, we were separated. and it was very strict Catholic. And boys were on one side, girls were on the other side. And it was a sin to look at a boy. It was a sin to look at a girl. And with all that teachings of the white system, it was a sin to even do our culture and our language and our ceremonies. So being a Kitsan Wet'suwet'en, I didn't know I was even Native. You know, even though there was all Native kids. When I went to school, there was over 300 kids in that building. Wow. So being just part of a mass, we weren't individuals. We were just a group of kids that institutionalized in that. Because it was, the residential school was about 20, 30 miles from, isolated, coming from the different communities. So when people tried to run away, you know, we all got punished. So, like, I remember one time this girl ran away, and she was part of our group, like our intermediate, they call it. So we all got punished. We all got strapped, and she got worse of it. So there's mass punishment, corporal punishment. So.
And so, do you have any memories, like from before residential school, of your family, of your community?
No.
No. So you mentioned that they you know, separated, you know, all the children, you know, between, you know, the intermediates and the primaries, from family members, from boys and girls. Do you think that that was something that they were intending for, and, you know, next stages of oppression?
Yes, I think that was their goal, because when I went through it, we didn't know what was going on. We just followed, you know, because of if we didn't, we all got punished, you know, or severely punished. And they withheld food from us if we didn't do anything. They withheld our seeing our brothers and sisters, you know, and they used corporal punishment in the 50s and 60s. And a lot of them, we've heard a lot of stories that the corporal punishment is withholding food, isolating them, and strapping was the biggest thing that they used. And when I went to school, I did research. That was part of my undergrad and graduate work, was doing the research for residential school.
Oh, goodness. So what kind of life trajectories were they, you know, preparing students for, like post, you know, school?
In the school started in the 1700s. From 1700s to when I went in the 50s, their main goal was to get us ready to work in the white system. In the 1800s, they were getting the kids ready to work as servants as to the white system, and to integrate them into the white system. And even when I went in the 50s, we were still being trained to work in the white system.
And so when you left residential school, when you presumably aged out of foster care, at the time, what kind of you know, acts of repatriatization were you witnessing? Was that even a common sight to witness somebody reclaiming their identity post-residential school?
Yes, the impact was really great with survivors. The impacts of the residential school, what we witnessed and what we experienced. Every residential school survivor had some form of trauma, you know, and depending what they witnessed and what they experienced. And for my family, it was not belonging, because we were abandoned, you know. And I remember the supervisors telling us that nobody wanted us, you know, that your community doesn't want you, your family doesn't want you. And being in Christian residential school, they seen our ceremonies and our language and our culture as sin. So they punished us, you know, if they tried to speak the language and talk about what's happening during the summer, like ceremonies. So we were punished again. So we were shamed into being just a native person, and shamed to even going back to our community. I didn't go back to my own community. I stayed in the interior of Williams Lake, and I grew up in Sugarcane, because that's where we stayed, and that was the closest community to the residential school that I attended. So I grew up in the interior and never knew my own people. So I never knew the culture, I never knew the language, I still don't. But I know more of the Schwappen because that's where I grew up.
Did you yourself integrate into the local community there?
And when I was growing up, I stayed in the interior, like Williams Lake, Soda Creek, and Sugarcane, and staying with friends, again, not belonging. So, and when we don't belong, we don't fit in anywhere. And for me, it was education. And my books, I always like reading, and I think that was saved me, was staying with my books and education. And when I left residential school, I said, I'm going to change this. So I put myself through school. I finished grade 12. I went into post-secondary, and I did into university. And everything based on residential school, the impacts, the history, and how we lost our communities. So to this day, I still do that. I still do a lot of workshops, presentations, and community presentations of the history and impacts of residential school.
Wow. So when you started your academic journey, what was it like being more or less like an expert on, you know, the topics that were at hand?
Scary. It was really scary because we were never allowed to talk about it. You know, again, waiting to be punished for it, and keeping secrets, and told that we weren't going to amount to anything. So fighting against that, against the system that we grew up in, and trying to change the people that we work with, and being their voice. And that was part of my moving forward, was I wanted to be that voice for people that could not speak, and for people that never made it out.
Were there, along your academic journey, did you meet other young people like yourself that were interested in the same sort of things, working against the system?
No.
No.
Because other survivors were really scared. They didn't want to do, because education wasn't part of that. You know, education was part of my healing. That I had to do my own education. I had to teach myself, because we never had traditional teachings. We never had traditional language or ceremonies, or even how to look after yourself, or parenting. Because in our traditions, parenting starts from birth, you know, to elders. And we never had that. We never had those teachings from our elders. So a lot of my generation was the lost ones, because we didn't have that. And the fear of having that was too great for a lot of them, you know, that, and they said, and it went to addiction, or not even going back to their community. So, and that's how come I tell the people that's how come a lot of our people end up on the streets, or, you know, don't go back to their community, or even do ceremonies. And they're already integrated into the white system.
Did you find, you know, along your academic journey, you know, I'm sure that as a human you needed to, you know, take care of yourself in all sorts of ways, including, you know, spiritual. you know, what tools, part of, like, you know, the academic, you know, environment that you were in at the time, were there many tools to help you on your journey?
Not when I started. When I started my undergrad, or even during high school, there was nothing talked about residential school. There was no resources about residential school when I was doing my work and research, compared to now, which is really good. But when I did mine, there was only probably about 3 or 4 books out on residential school, and the basis of that, a lot of it was interviews. And when I did my undergrad and graduate work, I was taught by residential school survivors. I was taught by elders, and the school that I attended, we were taught traditionally, and that's where my traditional journey started. When I was doing my undergrad and graduate work, to be okay with their traditions and ceremonies and language, and the elders taught me that. I had to teach myself to fight those feelings that it's okay to do that. So learning from our elders, but also the Western. So when I was doing my undergrad and graduate work, I combined the two, which I'm still doing today. I combined the two in being a therapist. And it took a long time to get there, but I completed in being a therapist, and now I have my master's of Indigenous social work and being an Indigenous therapist. And it was so good, and I believe it was the ancestors that put that in my path, that everything I wanted was there. How do I get to the school? How was I recruited to do my undergrad, my master's? Because I didn't ask for it. Recruiters came to our school, and he said, we want some students to do this program. And that's how I completed my master's.
Wow. And so, you know, throughout your journey, you mentioned how towards the beginning of your journey there were, you know, few tools that were available, few resources that were available compared to nowadays. Did you witness that sort of revitalization of tools that were available for Indigenous scholars?
Yes, for sure. And it made it more, the doors open for the next generation. Our generation, I found that we did go so far, but, you know, the fear again that I can't do it. I can't walk through that door. And the next generation, that's our children and our grandchildren, they're more open to go through that door and talk about things like what happened to us in residential school, the details, the impacts of what happened to us and how we hand it down to the next generation. So impacts of our family, impacts of our community, impacts of what happened to that survivors.
Yeah. How can we create spaces that, you know, are inclusive and healing for the next generations?
Given a safe space for our elders, our survivors, to say it's okay to talk about that, to say that it's okay to say what you want to say, to give the voices, because a lot of our survivors are passing away. Fewer and fewer survivors left, even in our community that we work in. Fewer and fewer are less to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it because nobody wants to listen. So we need to, I think, and that's what I'm doing, is I'm doing a lot of workshops on just what happened to our survivors. You know, the impacts of that and why we don't want to share. You know, and I do my presentations in elementary and universities. You know, our kids, they need to understand what happened to us in residential school. So, and the laws has changed, you know, in education now it's mandatory that residential school is talked about.
Absolutely.
That's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm grateful that you know that the survivors, who you know who created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had created an actionable list of things that we can do, and I'm glad that nowadays, when we think of what can we do for our Indigenous friends, there's a huge long list of them, of things that can be done. And so, in your own words, how would you, what advice would you give to the young people who want to bridge the generational gap, connecting with the different generations, to promote healing?
That's a really good question. I was just talking about, we did a presentation in one of our northern communities, where we worked with our youth, worked with our community members, that teaching them that it's okay, even to this day, that it's still okay to talk about residential school, and our youth to listen with an open heart and open mind, because our youth don't want to talk about it because of fear that they're going to hurt their parents or aunts or uncles. But to get our youth and our elders and our community members together and start working together, to start creating a safe space for our elders, not only from survivors of residential school, but survivors of the 60 scoop and the welfare system, because that's coming back up again. And every time there's a new impact on news, like the 215, that really impacted our people, and is still impacting our people. And also our youth are being more supportive of how they want to help. And we always say, if you really want to help, get involved. Open your heart and your mind and listen to those stories. And understand, get the knowledge to understand what survivors went through, and why are we closed off, and why can't we talk about it. So making it safe for them to talk about it.
Can you tell me your thoughts on the role of storytelling in intergenerational relationships and healing?
Storytelling is that's what we did before. Everything was oral. We didn't have papers, we didn't have books, or the TV and computers that the kids use nowadays, gaming and all that. Storytelling is listening. Storytelling is what we're doing now. We connect. So connection of allowing the storyteller to tell their story, and the listeners to open up their hearts and their minds, that it's okay.
I love that. And so I also wanted to ask, what traditions do you believe are important these days for that intergenerational bonding?
All traditions.
All traditions.
All traditions, no matter what it is. Because a lot of our people are integrated into different marriages, and we're not just First Nations anymore. So they really need to understand that they come from both worlds. And sometimes it's three that's dealing with the white system. So, and that's where a lot of our First Nations youth are lost, because they don't understand what happened to their community, and don't understand what happened to their family, and why the youth are lost again. So they call that the lost generation, like us. We were the lost generation, now our youth is, because they don't understand where they are.
And so, in what ways can we honor the experience of our young people to foster a sense of community healing?
To teach.
Yeah.
Get the teachings, not only from our own culture, but also the white system. They got to learn the white system and the voices, to become the voice of their family. To bring a lot of our communities to say their youth is their future, but they don't prepare our youth. we need to prepare our youth from birth to youth, you know, saying that you're going to be our future, so this is your role. Because that's how it was in the 1800s. Everybody had a role. So if you want a youth to step into that role of being a leadership, being a hunter, being a protector, you know, you need to start teaching them at a young age and say it's okay, you know, to be a First Nations. It's okay to speak your language and the ceremonies. And also the roles, to understand the roles of an elder and youth and our protectors, our leadership.
And so how do you think that intergenerational relationships contribute to a stronger and more resilient community?
Again, communication.
Communication.
And understanding their language, understanding their culture, understanding protocol. Because every community, every family, every territory has their own protocol. You know, even before we go into a territory, we have to understand it. And our youth need to start understanding the protocol in their area. And if they're, like a good example, I'm from interior. Our protocol is different than the coast. And if I go up north, that's totally different again. And if I go into our Williams Lake territory, that again, the protocol is different. So our youth need to understand that this is how it was.
Yeah.
So to make them understand that, to understand the protocol, the culture, the language.
So for our young people who are more aware nowadays, where can they go, like, look for the answers to these questions, like for protocol? Like where can a young person search for protocol?
I would say gatherings. And most communities have gatherings and nobody shows up. And this is where our youth really need to step up and say, you know, if we're going to have a gathering, if we're going to a powwow, or if we're going to a feast, or if we're going to a gathering, we'll pick up the elders for you. So getting the youth involved, but also to understand the protocol of that. If we're going to a powwow, this is a protocol. If we're going to a gathering, this is a protocol that we have to learn to get there. And the youth better understand that. You know, if I'm going into, let's go down to the coast. The coast is a potlatch system. Where the interior, we don't have potlatch. In the coast, we use cedar. But interior, we don't use cedar. So different medicines. So to teach the children from a young age that the medicines are different in each territory.
Yeah, that is so true. Like over here on this territory, I'm finding, I was researching some medicines and, you know, for the different seasons, and something I came across that, you know, grows locally was cottonwood.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's on my radar now.
Yeah, and even back east, you know, they don't use cedar or sage.
Really?
No, they use sweetgrass. And
oh, yeah.
So it's a trading. You know, when we go to gatherings, we could collect cedar and sage and trade for sweetgrass from back east.
What sort of things did you have prepared today for me to ask?
Yeah, the things that I was thinking about when you were before the interviews was how was it in residential school? How did I get there? But also the impacts, and finishing off with the healing. What happened to me? Because being at a young age and being institutionalized in the Catholic system and the white system, but also the impacts of that. So the kids need to understand what happened to me. I witnessed a lot of horrors in that building, you know, and ingrained in us that we can't say anything. So trust, to understand that the trust, and also to keep secrets. You know, being abused in that building, we had to keep secrets. We weren't allowed to say anything. And being mass punished, corporal punishment. So when the youth understand why we let them do whatever they want to do, we're protecting them. When we tell the kids that, well, mom and dad didn't teach us that, well, nobody taught us that either. We were institution. You know, nobody told us the traditional teachings and understanding the medicines and how to look after yourself, because we didn't have self. We hated ourselves because we were Native. We hated ourselves because they were told us that we weren't going to amount to anything. So to understand that, our youth need to understand that they need to start teaching us again, that it's okay to have that. And the next generation, I always say, because we're all coming of age now, I believe it's the next generation's turn to pick up that fight, to continue our language, to continue our culture and our language and our ceremonies, you know, and attending ceremonies, even if they don't understand what's happening. Ceremonies come in different ways. And again, in territories is different. Our interior ceremonies is different. Where the coast, you know, longhouses is different. And I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks because I'm going to be in ceremony for 2 weeks. I'm going to be in prayer for 2 weeks. So that's part of my ceremony, was to be in prayer for those 2 weeks and in ceremony, but also really strict ceremony, that we're there only to pray, you know, and pray for our people and pray for their families and stuff.
How do you get invited to ceremony? Like, I know you've had a lot of time to meet, to build your connections and to, you know, build your community. You know, but I'm curious, is that something when you're feeling like, you know, you need something, do you put it out there in the world and then it, you know, sort of comes to fruition, or do you, you know, have to build it yourself, or do you seek it? Like, how does that come to be for ceremony?
For me, remember I didn't believe in, I didn't know, I didn't understand what culture was, our First Nations culture. And like you said, I was really blessed by ancestors. I was protected by the ancestors. They put things in my path to get me here where I'm at today. And when the kids ask, well, how do I do that? Again, you need to understand yourself. You need to open up your heart, open up your mind, and ask what you want. I want to learn about my culture. I want to learn about especially those that grew up in the white culture or foster care system. And a lot of them say, well, nobody taught us. And I used to say that, you know, and I said, now I need to teach myself. I need to learn about myself and research it before I can feel comfortable in doing it. And when you go to ceremonies, it's usually you're invited, or usually you're a helper. You know, you can go in there and you can help, you know, to set up the ceremony. Or usually when in our ceremony, it's usually you're a helper for a year before you start going into the circle. So that has a better understanding of where your strengths are.
As a young person myself, I haven't had all too much experience with any sort of ceremonies, really.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that's on my radar, and I think as a young person, I want to find other young people who are also seeking opportunities like that, so that we can go learn together. It almost seems like, you know, in this, you know, giant world that's so big and complex that, you know, it almost feels like, you know, I'm very simple and just want something like to take care of my nerves and to, you know, build community, and so it almost seems like a larger than life task to, you know, seek out.
And it's scary too.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
scary. Yeah. So to make them feel comfortable, they have to feel comfortable in themselves first. First thing is to be Native. And the next thing is to walk that path. The healing path is the everyday thing, not just on Sunday.
Absolutely.
You know, every day we have to do something to take care of ourselves. And once you feel comfortable with that, then you can go up to an elder, then you can go up to a spiritual person or a teacher and say, have that protocol of that territory and say, this is what I want. Because in our territory, we use tobacco. That's our medicine. So if I need information or if I need something, I'll bring tobacco to an elder or a teacher and say, this is what I need, can you help me? And when they accept it, then they'll help you. So each territory is different. And I know the coast doesn't use tobacco, so I don't know what they use. So
how reliable is learning about your culture through the lens of academics, like the stuff that has been produced in the last 100 years? Like, do you think that's a reliable source to find information from?
Depends where they get it from.
Depends.
You got to remember who's the author. Who's their author and who is their teacher. And that's when you need to really understand and go with your gut instinct. If I feel uncomfortable with the person I'm talking to, then I need to stay with that. I need to take care of myself. But now with all this media, internet and everything, you almost can find anything on the internet, Truly, yeah. And even if it may not be true, you'll have some understanding of the culture that you want to use. Because in every territory is different culture, different traditions, and different ceremonies. It's okay to research it, to find out if this is what I want. And if I don't need that, I can go to another culture and use that.
And for, and so speaking into the room, urban Indigenous young people who may be, away from their home territories, who feel, entrenched in city life, would you recommend at some point, traveling back to your home community? Like, was that something that you advise young people living in the city?
I think it really depends how far they have to go and can they afford it. So again, media, Zoom meetings, connect with their chief and council, connect with their elders, and maybe once a year they can go back as a group, and have a purpose. The reason I want to go to this community is to learn about the hunting. The reason I want to maybe go about the fishing, the food gathering, the medicines, and the ceremonies. Because every hunting, every fishing, everything is done with ceremony, if it's going to be done in a good way. So that once the youth understand that, they need to do the research again. Like, a good example, if they want to go up north to learn about hunting, they can't just go up there and say, this is what I want. They need to understand the territory, the culture, and who's the hunter that they're going to talk to, who's the teacher. And even before they go into that territory, they need to find out whose territory is that. Is there a protocol? Because I know up north there's protocols. You can't just go step on their land and hunt without their territory, and what's the ceremony that I need to do before I get there.
So as a young adult, did you have a mentor that helped you learn these things?
Not when I was going to school.
No.
But when I was doing my education, my undergrad and my graduate work, even after that, I had a lot of teachers, not from the Western, but also from our traditional teachers, that helped me balance the two. And through my work, I do a lot of Western and traditional. And I had a lot of teachers from different territory, not just one territory, but right from across Canada, like back east, down south, and up north. So to be opened with your heart and your mind, and to be open, saying, I need to learn. And being in the city, those are all the people that's here too, from all the different territories.
Did you spend your young adult life in the city?
In residential school.
As residential school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the privilege of cities or towns, or I was institution until I came of age of 17.
Okay, yeah. So around that time,
Yeah.
did you have, like, where were you living?
We were after school, we were just let out the door.
Just out the
With
door, so
no-
wherever you were,
Yeah,
that's where you were.
yeah. Even on welfare, they call it coming of age. You're out the door, see you, goodbye. You know, so we weren't prepared to live on our own. You know.
What were your first steps into, getting on your feet and, finding your direction?
Again, I was blessed with ancestors and protectors, and when I finished residential school, they let us out in grade 8 or 9, but a group of us said we don't want to go back to the reserve, so we wanted to finish school. So we went and made arrangements to stay in they call it a dorm. So that's when we finished our grade 12. And again, the ancestors stepped in and say, you're going to the college. So I did my college, and I worked for a while, and then another ancestor says, you're going to do your undergrad, you're going to do your master's, and you're going to do your bachelor's, and doing it in social work. Because when I did my bachelor's in Indigenous social work, the recruiters came from Saskatoon.
Long ways.
And I was the first, probably second First Nations to do a bachelor's of Indigenous social work in Saskatoon. So we spent 4 years there to do, and also again, when I came back to BC and worked, the ancestors opened the door and says, okay, those that took their bachelor's of Indigenous social work, now we want you for our master's.
Oh, the school's not...
Yeah, so the doors are opened, and the recruiters came and said, this is prepared for you. So all those that graduated, I think there was 8 of us that graduated from that program.
Wow.
And we all went back and did our master's.
Wow. Did you find it easier to listen to the ancestors as opposed to listening to yourself?
Yes, then, yeah. Yeah, because I had no skills to look after myself, to take care of myself, because we weren't given that.
Wow. Well, it's impressive. It speaks to, making yourself a student of life, and you're always there to learn, and, I noticed that within myself with, during my day-to-day, is that there are so many, good things that I learn from people all around that it only helps to sharpen me up and to, and that's important for a young person to kind of start with, well, I'm humble and I don't know much, and I want to know, and start on that journey.
Yeah, and it's really important for the kids to understand it's okay to be simple life. It's okay to be humble, but also to be positive. All the things that I went through, all the things that I witnessed, the trauma that I went through, I stayed positive because of the ancestors that were with me. And I always call that the path of 5 sisters, because there was 5 of us that were taken. And so far, I can't speak of what happened to them, but so far I'm the only one that continued to education.
I think that's fantastic. I know that, on your journey, you help inspire young people who meet you. And I'm so grateful that, we were able to have this conversation. I do feel that, with me doing the work that I do, I feel the ancestors behind me as well. And even when I'm the most shy person in the room, I feel like it, just shrivel up into a little ball and get tossed away.
Yeah.
I still feel strong, because my ancestors, like all of the generations that came before me, are witnessing, what we're doing now. I felt that, the creator and the ancestors, they did their thing and they made this happen today, and and they're supporting,
and that's how I survived, was listening to the ancestors. And being in the dark of the trauma of residential school, and then going through the 60 school, I was protected. So to understand, and that's when I say you need to be positive and have an open heart and open mind.
Well, Shirley, I wanted to ask you if there was anything that you wanted to speak into the room. If there was anything any questions that you had for me.
I think the only thing that I would like to tell the next generation is to believe in themselves. Even though you were not taught by our generation. I think for me, I like to challenge all our youth, our young people, to reach inside and to better understand themselves first, of what they want out of life. And once they have that, they need to open up their hearts and their minds and ask their ancestors, like we did. It's there. They're waiting. And I always tell my kids that you just need to say prayers and those doors will be opened for you. Because if you doubt yourself and say, I can't do it, the ancestors will wait for you. They'll wait until you're ready, and then they'll put those things in their path like they did with me. And it'll be clear. So I just like to challenge the youth to start believing in themselves, that they are worth it, and they are our next generation. Kuksha.
Those are some beautiful words,
Yeah.
Shirley. Thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing this conversation with us, for bringing your awesome self here.
Kuksha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for all the folks still listening, I wanted to remind folks to share this video in your circles, and to subscribe to Woven Spirit. And we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.
Kuksha.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Woven Spirit, Threads of Wisdom. We understand that the stories shared today may be challenging or triggering. If you need support, please reach out to our crisis line, available 24/7 at 1-800-721-0066. Remember, you don't have to navigate these feelings alone. Support is always here for you.